Today, we're going to be talking about one of the most difficult and, frankly, tragic policies in all of American history, the forced removal of Native American nations from their homes in the southeastern United States. As long as grass grows or water runs. It's a beautiful, poetic phrase, right? It was used over and over again in treaties between the U.S. and Native nations. It was supposed to mean forever. But as we're about to see, those words would end up becoming a symbol of a deeply broken promise. So what was the real driving force behind this push for removal? Well, if you boil it all down, the answer is pretty simple. Land. A relentless, insatiable hunger for territory that was fueled by a booming population and a growing economy. I mean, just look at these numbers. The demographic pressure was absolutely immense. In just a couple of decades, the U.S. population just exploded. Meanwhile, the native population east of the Mississippi was getting squeezed into smaller and smaller areas. You could almost feel the tension ratcheting up on the frontier. And this wasn't just about making room for settlers. No, this was about fueling a massive economic engine. The land was absolutely essential for the cotton kingdom in the south and for growing grain up north. At the end of the day, this was about building a continental empire from one ocean to the other. And here's the central contradiction of the whole thing. From the very beginning, the United States government officially recognized that Native Americans were the rightful owners of the land. It says it right there. This wasn't some kind of legal gray area. It was a stated fact. And that makes everything that happened next all the more disturbing. This whole policy of removal would find its champion in one powerful, dominant figure who would take the idea and turn it into the law of the land, Andrew Jackson. So who was Andrew Jackson before he became president? Well, his entire identity was wrapped up in the frontier economy. He was a land speculator, a merchant, a slave trader, and he's been described as the most aggressive enemy of the Indians in early American history. You really have to understand this background to get what drove him. His military career is what made him a national hero. But he wasn't just a soldier. He was famous for being an Indian fighter. Victories like the Battle of Horseshoe Bend against the Creek Nation, they weren't just military wins, they were massive land grabs. Jackson himself would negotiate the treaties that seized millions of acres. It was a direct line from military conquest to territorial expansion. And here, you can hear his strategy in his own words. He believed that to get what you wanted in a negotiation, you had to exploit what he saw as their two main emotions, greed or fear. So this was never about finding a mutual agreement. It was about psychological manipulation and pure coercion to get the land. So, when Jackson wins the presidency in 1828, what had been his personal mission was about to become official United States policy. Now, there was a major constitutional showdown brewing here. On the one hand, you had federal law, which was very clear. Tribal lands were under federal control. But on the other hand, you had southern states like Georgia and Mississippi who were hungry for that land and just ignored the federal government. They passed their own laws claiming control, basically trying to erase the tribes as legal entities. The big question was, who would the president side with? Jackson didn't even hesitate. He came down firmly on the side of the states against his own government's laws and treaties. He literally ordered the army to go tell the tribes that the U.S. government was going to back the states. And just like that, the full power of the presidency was behind removal. 102 to 97. That was the vote. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 passed the House of Representatives by just 5 votes. It's incredible. It just goes to show you how deeply divided the country was on this. One of the most devastating acts in American history passed by the thinnest of margins. But we have to be clear. The Native nations did not go quietly. They fought back. They resisted. And they used every tool they possibly could, from trying to assimilate and using the legal system, all the way to armed conflict. The Cherokee strategy is just a fascinating story. They essentially did everything the United States claimed it wanted them to do. They adopted American-style farming and private property. They created their own written language. They even drafted a formal constitution. They totally remade their society to prove they could coexist. And when that didn't work, they put their faith in the American legal system. And you know what? They won. The Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, sided with the Cherokees. The ruling was crystal clear. Georgia had no authority over them. Their sovereignty was protected. It was an absolute, stunning legal victory. But that victory turned out to be meaningless. Why? Because President Andrew Jackson simply ignored the Supreme Court. He's famously quoted as saying, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now, let him enforce it." And in that moment, the entire system of checks and balances just crumbled. For those who chose to fight, like the Sauk leader Black Hawk, the end was just as tragic. His surrender speech, it just captures this profound sense of despair, like a world was ending. The military might of the United States was just too much to overcome. With legal challenges ignored and military resistance crushed, the final act of this tragedy began: the forced relocation of tens of thousands of people in what we now know as the Trail of Tears. The Choctaws went first. People who were there described this horrifying scene of thousands of people being marched west by guards, treated, in their words, like a flock of sheep, driven from the only homes they'd ever known to a place they had never even seen. The Creeks were next, and this quote, it comes from an American Army colonel who was there, on the ground. It's haunting. He saw it all firsthand. The fear, the starvation, the constant abuse. He described to people who were just completely broken down by the ordeal. And then, the Cherokees. Out of the 17,000 men, women, and children who were rounded up into camps and forced to march west, an estimated 4,000 died. They died from disease, from starvation, from the cold. Nearly a quarter of their entire population wiped out. And how did the U.S. government report on this? Well, as the last of the Cherokees were freezing and dying on the trail in the winter of 1838, Jackson's successor, President Martin Van Buren, stood before Congress and declared the policy a massive success. He said it had produced the happiest effects. The disconnect between the words from Washington and the reality on the ground is just staggering. And so, that leaves us with a really tough question, doesn't it? A question that forces us to look at the connection between a nation's ambition, its broken promises, and the unbelievable human cost of a policy that was, at the time, called a success.
If this story made you think, hit the like button and share it with someone who loves history but wants to hear the untold side of it. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification, because these stories were hidden for a reason. This episode was American History, Part 7. If you missed the first 5 parts, don't worry. Click on Part 1, Part 6 on your screen, or visit the channel to watch the full series from the beginning. Thank you for watching. History isn't just what we're taught, it's what we uncover.